folks. Thank you for all the feedback on our initial hands-on testing of the 70-180 lens. We got so many suggestions. I've actually gotten in 4 different lenses, and we're going to do an ultimate 70-200 shootout now with some slight variations in focal length, some native, some adapted, whole range of different testing situations. First up with low light sports here at this pole dance studio. So when I called out for you guys on the first video to let me know what you wanted to see tested, a lot of you wanted to see the 70-180 tested on bodies that aren't flagships like the Z9. So we've done the Z9, but I also got in the Z6 II for us to test out. It's not an APS-C, but it is a much lower body with much simpler autofocus. So I'm gonna run through all 5 of the lenses again and see how it goes. I've just started shooting with the native lens, and the first thing that jumps out at me shooting it straight after the Z9 is shooting dancers with the blackout on these, on normal mirrorless cameras. It makes it really difficult. With the Z9, I'm just so used to never missing and seeing when she's about to move or seeing as she starts to go into a move. Here with that blackout, I find myself kind of trailing behind by half a second, and you just don't know if the autofocus is staying with because the point is on and off, on and off. It's kind of losing its a means of tracking because it doesn't have a constant feed like you do with a camera that doesn't have a mechanical shutter at all. So anyway, we'll shoot all 5, and again, I'll give you sample files that you can download. Okay, so we've been shooting with all 5 of these for a little bit there with Zaki. I would say all of them are acceptable, but in a situation like this, it might look bright to you at home, but it's actually still dark in here, even with added lighting. I was into the thousands of ISO, even using f2.8 lenses. So once we switch to like the variable aperture lens, where once you're at like 135 mil, you're already at f6.3. You're at ISO 8000 and above, and your image quality is really going to suffer. So I think that could be the biggest determining factor, is how much light do you typically have to shoot with, because 2.8 versus 4, let alone 6.3, really makes a huge difference. In terms of the tracking, my anecdotal feeling is that the 70-180 is doing quite well in actually identifying and sticking with the eye rather than, sticking with her in general. The Sigma and even the adapted Nikon 70-200 2.8, the E version, were not staying with the eye that much. It was still fine, but it's not like it was noticeable, the difference, and going to, the red checker pattern on the body more often than these ones were, and the Sigma hitting the background a fair bit. 24 to 200 was also fairly hit and miss, but the newest one, the native Z 70 to 200 f2.8, was easily the best, staying with her right on the face and head the whole time, even when it was getting obstructed. But it was interesting to see second was probably the 70 to 180, and third may actually, in terms of being on the face, may even be the Sigma. I'm not sure. It was kind of close between the three of them. Man, I'm really surprised how much this FLED lens is vignetting. I had never really noticed in the past. Have you ever noticed when you're shooting something wide open and then you stop down and it seems to get brighter? That's generally vignetting. The corners are so darkened, the frame looks dark, that when I stop down to f4, the whole shot just suddenly becomes brighter, even though my metering and everything hasn't changed, just because the vignette has lifted. Really noticeable on this lens. Now, in terms of the image quality, it's impossible to see on the back of the screen. Even, there's only 4 or 5 foot between the pole and the wall here, so to know if it's actually stayed right on her or hit the background or that kind of thing with focus, I'm really going to need to get home and look at them on the big screen. You can download a whole selection of sample files. I'll make them available as a link below over at my Art Nude Portraiture website. Shooting with Zaki is always fun. Please check out her Instagram in the description below, and you can also check Whilst in studio, I also did a quick vignette test. Here's the Sigma at f2.8, fairly strong in the edges there, and at f4 it cleans up a fair bit. Looking at the older Nikon 70 to 200, it's not as heavy in the corners as the Sigma was, but it extends further in. But at f4 it cleans up even better. The 24 to 200, it's obviously not a 2.8, so this first shot is at f6.3, and at that point it's not too bad. At f8 it's clearing up. The 70 to 180 is actually probably a bit better than all of them so far, wide open and stopping down to f4. And the newest Z70 to 200 is actually quite heavy right in the corners, but it doesn't extend too far in, and it cleans up really nicely by f4. Now the 70 to 200 does great in studio, but it's also a sports lens, so next up let's head out and shoot some football to see how they do with moving subjects. Okay, so the FLED via the FTC in this good light, absolutely fine. I would have no problem saying that if you're going to a flagship like the Z8 or Z9, that using your FTC adapter and keeping your existing lens is going to be a fine option for you if you're shooting outdoors. It's doing just fine, not having any of those issues of it, kind of struggling to find the face that we had a little bit in the low light studio. Yeah, already this is more noticeable, noticeably faster, sorry. But the lens stabilization, it does kind of grab the frame, which can be a little off-putting. There's a couple of different modes you can set the VR to. I might adjust it. Yeah, so moving it to sport. Yeah, then it doesn't grab it in the same way, and it's a more comfortable way of shooting for this kind of moving subject. Having just shot with the FLED lens, the native 70-200 Z mount, it's just that much quicker, that much more responsive. It just feels more bulletproof, and the images on the back of screen at least have a more 3D pop to them. I think it's got less of a vignette, which could be a big part of it. Everything's nice and bright and even. I'll shoot the 70-180 next so I can compare them side by side, then put the TC on each one and see how they do. So the 70-180, I would say, is about as fast and responsive as the FLED was, not at the 70-200 native speed, but I would say it's picking up faces smaller and further away than the adapted lens was. Almost as good as the native, the flagship one. So let's try it with the 2x teleconverter. So now we're looking at a 140-360 f5.6. I'll get a shot on the goalkeeper with this and the other one, both with the converter, to show you the difference. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind, even today on a bright sunny day, at ISO 100 at f5.6, I'm down at like a 200th of a second or slower, which is okay, but if I'm at 360 mil, the lens doesn't have stabilization, I'm relying only on the in-body one, I think we're going to see a noticeable difference in terms of how many shots come back pin sharp on the 70-200, being that it has in-body image stabilization as well. I found that before, that what I could handhold was about a stop and a half slower with the Big Brother, but still, you got to say
that's a nice compact kit to get you out to 360 mil. And the images are looking good, just I might need to keep my ISO up around 400 to get my shutter speed. Here I'm up to like 1/800th of a second. Okay, so good news for those of you who are F-mount shooters moving to Z-mount. If you have the FL-ED lens, outdoors in good natural light, it's working great. Face detection, eye detection, all working really well, tracking really well. None of the issues of it struggling to keep up like we had a little bit on the indoor studio shoot. Good result. With the Big Brother lens, you really just get so many faces and options, and it's so responsive. It is expensive, but it's the best performance. Okay, switching to the 24-200. It's a lens that has some obvious advantages. I was able to get in close wide angle shots with Zaki that gave a different kind of feel. Here, unless they're right here, 24 is not going to be useful. So really I'm just sacrificing a bit on image quality and aperture to get the compactness. I have to say though, at maximum length, it's really not any smaller, it's actually a little longer than the 70-180 is. Let's see, here as I said, dropping the aperture down does give us some limitations in terms of the shutter speed we can get. Here at ISO 200 at f6.3, again, I'm down at like 1/100th of a second. So I'll probably need to go up to ISO 400 to get a usable shutter speed. Okay, so noticeably slower. I would say out of the three, this is noticeably the slowest to pull focus through the range. I mean, that's to be expected though. I think this is by far the oldest lens on the market in terms of when it was originally released. So look, main takeaway I would say from this section is that I think any of them really are going to do the job for you. The Sigma is noticeably in 5th place. It's not really that surprising. It is the oldest, it's also the heaviest, it's also the least expensive of the true 70-200 f2.8s. It'll still get the job done, but if you were shooting in low light situations, I would go for something more modern. I did try to get the Tamron version in, but unfortunately they weren't able to loan it to me. In my experience in the past, it is more responsive than this guy, but sadly, we couldn't get it in the test. Okay, folks, this is probably getting to be quite a long video, so let me give you my final thoughts. The image quality, check out the sample files yourself. That's over at learn.artnudeportraiture.com, and whilst you're there, don't forget to check out my new course, 1 Week in Bangkok. Okay, so 24-200, definite image quality sacrifice and aperture sacrifice, but the focus is great and it does give you lots of flexible options. Just note, if you're not shooting in bright, continuous light or daylight, you're going to struggle with that aperture and your ISO is going to be up really, really high. The 70-180 is a fantastic option, light and cheap, image quality is good, focus is great. The only thing on the 2x teleconverter, I think because it's not optically quite at the level of the other Nikon lenses, you do see an image degradation. The FL-ED lens, doing pretty well, but it is noticeably behind the native mount lenses in terms of autofocus. Also has a serious vignette, but if you're using it and liking it on your DSLRs, picking up the FTC adapter to use on the higher end Z cameras is likely to give you a good result.
Finally, well not finally, the Sigma, definitely showing its age. It's really well built, but it's incredibly heavy. I would say it's it's by far the oldest, so I don't mean to be unfairly critical of them. Sigma lenses are fantastic, but in the range of 70 to 200s here and the 70 to 180, it would probably be my last pick. But that said, if I owned it, I don't know whether I would pay the extra money to upgrade. The image quality is still quite good. Depending on your use case scenario, it may deliver everything you want. And no surprise, the 70 to 200 Z f2.8 lens is performing the best. It's just that much better optically than all of the other lenses. It really stands apart. The focus is also the best. And the real test, it's optically so good that when you add the 2x teleconverter, it still performs really well in terms of image quality, whereas the 70 to 180, you're starting to see a lot of softness in the files. Do check them out. Remember to check out the Nikon Z setup guide if you're in the Z system. Links for everything, including our models today, are in the description below. Thank you. I'll see you guys soon.